to get answers. And so part of what I'm doing with the whiteboard is not only posing questions, but also taking down the answers. And so one of my favorite whiteboard moments is when I asked a CEO why he deserved to be paid so much. I'd like for you to please explain to the American public why you and 4 other executives deserve to pay yourselves tens of millions of dollars each year. I've got an empty whiteboard ready to take down your justifications.
Right, I recognize that that's a considerable sum of money. I would, of course, point out that I don't have any direct input to my compensation. That's derived by the board, and it's the named executive office.
Reclaiming my time, sir. Do you not know why you're getting hundreds of millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars a year? What is the justification? I'd like to show the American people.
Please welcome Suzy Shuster and Katie Porter.
Hi, you guys. What a badass Katie Porter is. Can I have a round of applause for Katie Porter, who is a total badass? What was your reaction when you saw how the world tuned into you with that whiteboard and you schooled? You went to town. You showed them who's boss. What was your reaction to that?
I think I had a couple reactions. One was how much room there is for us to do better at doing the work of government, right? So the prop you saw, the tool that made Jamie Dimon look like he was crying, cost $2.99 at Target. Like, we can do so much better. So a whiteboard and some honesty is enough to engage millions of people in politics. I think the other thing is just that it is important to understand that the American people are interested in politics because politics determines what their lives are like, what opportunities are available to them, what world their children's gonna live in, what rights they're gonna have. But it's on us to make it interesting. So one of my biggest pet peeves in Washington, and this is a long list, is people who say, the American people just need to take more interest. No, you elected me to help you understand. You elected me to make it condensed, to make it where you can engage in it. And so for me, the whiteboard has just been a tool to doing that, and it's been reassuring that it's worked so well.
Or you could just talk to them the way I talk to my 4th grader and put things up on the board and say, do this or else, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of accountability there. I mean, I always say, you know, when I was a student, I always thought people liked their best students, the professors. You know, and I worked really hard to be like the A student. I was not the A+, but I was the A student for Elizabeth Warren. And I now realize that a lot of my success in Congress is due to all of my really terrible students. So if you were out there and you were unprepared, you came late, you didn't do the reading, that is perfect training for questioning witnesses in Congress. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really, you know, having seen the blank stare from the student, having heard the, you know, can you repeat the question? Or my personal favorite, what do you think about that?
Right.
And I actually had a government witness say, well, we'd be delighted to have you come help us. And I was like, I'm sorry, I tell you what to do. I work for the American people, and you apparently don't work for anybody. So I think you really have to own some of that power because it's a power that comes from the millions and millions of Americans whose lives are at stake and what happens in those hearing rooms.
So when you say that the writing is on the wall, you just say the writing's on the board.
Yep,
just
absolutely.
Look. How did a nice girl from Fort Dodge, Iowa, end up in a room full of crazies like the House of Representatives?
Well, I never wanted to be a politician. I was not one of these people who kind of came out of the womb in a navy blue blazer, and I was not a college Democrat. I actually wanted to be something else. I wanted to be a bureaucrat. I wanted to be someone who had my dream was like a windowless cubicle where I could actually deliver effective policy. I could make that form 2-page shorter. I could make that website telling you how to get help from the government actually make sense. And so I was set to go on the transition team when Hillary Clinton ran. And I had I went to Nordstrom, and Suzy, you'll appreciate that because we've talked about my personal style
We really have.
And so I went to Nordstrom and I bought winter clothes. And I live here in Orange County, so I bought tights. like tights and boots and dark compatible neutrals and things that are very East Coast, and I put them all in this suitcase, and I was going to go to Washington the morning after the election. And when Trump won, I went home and I was crying, and I started chucking things out of the suitcase, and then I started stuffing them back in, because I realized the next day I would have to take that suitcase into Nordstrom, and I did, and that was a very disappointed personal shopper. And I said, I want to return it all. And that shopper said, didn't anything work? Didn't anything work out? And I said, no, nothing. And so in that kind of feeling sad, I remember saying, like, I'll wait. Maybe Elizabeth Warren will, maybe Kamala Harris will be our president. Maybe there'll be somebody else who will see that I want to help. And somebody close to me said, I don't understand this, like this wait. You don't wait for anything. Like, you're the person who has 3 children, so you can spread them out in the grocery store checkout line to make sure you have the fastest line. Like, what? Like, Betsy, you're line 2, Paul 3, Luke 7. Like, we're going to see who can get through here the fastest. And so he said, why would you wait for someone else to make it possible for you to make a difference? It's you, it's each of us that needs to own that power and step up. And that doesn't mean we don't work in collaboration, it doesn't mean we don't learn from mentors, but I think my mindset growing up was, as an Iowa farm kid, work hard, and somebody will recognize you. And I think over time, I've realized that you have to start by recognizing what you have to offer. And then you have to figure out how to fit that into the opportunities that are there.
Let me do what you won't do. Yale, Harvard. You don't shy away from your degrees the way the Josh Hawleys and the Ted Cruzes do, those frauds who say they didn't go to a great school, right? You have all of this education, and you were heading towards academia. So why did you make the pivot, and who was influential in your life that helped you make that pivot?
Yeah. So I was a law professor before I ran for Congress. That's what I was doing when I was on the Clinton team, helping with policy. But I think what really made that conversation about you should not wait, you should run for office possible, is the work I did during the foreclosure crisis in California. And what I saw as someone who was teaching consumer protection law was that we actually have really pretty good laws. It's actually not legal to cheat people. It's not legal to discriminate against people in the workplace, for example, or to sexually harass them or anything else. But it happens every day, all day long. And so I realized that this is a huge gap between the law that gets written and then how that law really translates into people's lives. And I think that's that work in the foreclosure crisis. The banks promised they were going to stop cheating people, and then they went right back to cheating people. And it was my job to close that gap. And so I think that was what really got me interested in being in office, is seeing that too many policymakers, they fight and fight within Democrats and Republicans, this law, that law, this year, this dollar figure, this income cutoff. And nobody thinks about the fact that the whole form will be too complicated for anybody who has a dishwasher to unload to actually fill out and get help. So for me, it's a lot about, I'm not really interested in the law in the books. I'm interested in the law in people's lives. I'm interested in closing that gap between the press conference announcing these great tax credits or benefits or whatever it's going to be, and then whether you can figure out whether you can, in fact, afford a better dishwasher or not. That's the reality that I'm trying to close for people as a policymaker.
And who was your greatest mentor getting in? I know from our relationship that Kamala Harris, when she was, I think, the DA even coming up, and then going on to AG, and Senator said to me, you got to meet this lady, Katie Porter. You got to go down and knock on doors. And by the way, we need some door knockers, people. Whoever's available in the next 2 weeks, door knockers. I'll get your name and number after this. But who are the women that were most influential for you?
So I think first and foremost, my mom, who was stuck on this farm in Iowa, with 3 pretty stubborn, difficult children. And my dad was going broke farming. I remember my mom saying to my dad, just please stop losing money. I don't need you to make any, just please stop losing it. And my mom started her own business. She started a quilting company that she sold 15 years later to venture capitalists. And so this is really someone who, most in the literal sense, made something that made quilts, but then made a business out of it. And so seeing her, I think, was really important. And then both Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris were tremendously important. And when you go to run, one of the biggest reasons people don't run for office is they don't know how to get started. And so the ability to go from that conversation where somebody told me I should run to get endorsements and asks and help, that was really important. And I've tried to be that person for down ballot candidates, for people from different backgrounds who are running for office.
I would have asked you, without thinking, how do you balance 3 kids and a career in D.C.? But no one's asking the men in D.C. that question.
No, they are not. So I have a couple things to say about this. People ask me a lot, how do you do it? And my kind of pat, facile answer is, don't look behind the curtain. Because it's not that pretty. It's a lot of, I'm on the phone while I'm doing something else, while I'm trying to drive a kid to something. So it's a lot of juggling, but I think the whole concept of balance is super, super messed up. And at least it was for me until very recently. I thought about balance like, maybe because I'm a lawyer, balance is like the scales of justice. It's like this perfect thing that you put a kid on this side and a promotion on this side, and all of a sudden everything's easy, right? And in harmony. And that is complete malarkey. The real balance that you're trying to achieve, I think, as a working parent, or whether you're taking care of elder parents, is kind of like riding a bike. The goal is just not to fall over. If you are pedaling, you are winning. So I think that's how we have to think about balance. It's this kind of active balance. It's deciding that you can go a little farther. It's being okay with getting off the bike and having some water. It's if you fall down, there's no other way back, so you get back on the bike and start pedaling home. I think that is the kind of balance that we need to give ourselves permission to find in life.
I always tell that to my kids. I'm not going to pick you up. If you're biking to the end of the street, you got to turn around and go home, because no one's going to take your bike home. Let's talk about what's happening in the modern day right now. A lot of people wring their hands. They say the Supreme Court took away my rights. What's your answer to that?
So the Supreme Court didn't take away your rights. The Supreme Court took away the constitutional backstop to abortion being permissible, to abortion being legal. You can't look to the Constitution now. That's what Dobbs said. It's not a constitutional right. So what does that mean? That means that the right to have an abortion, the right to make your own decisions about when and if to start a family, is on each of us. It's on us. We are going to decide whether or not abortion is safe and legal in this country, and we're going to do it in this election, and the one after this, and the one after this. So the Supreme Court took away that backstop, meaning we are the backstop. You are the backstop. If you care about having the right to make a decision, if you care about women and people being able to make their own decisions about abortion, then you need to make it happen with your ballot, with your voice, with your talents, with your energy. It's on us. So I think the Supreme Court took it away. What am I going to do? The answer is sitting right in your chair, which is you are going to stand up and defend this right in this election and every election going forward.
So what strategies are in place to keep women's autonomies themselves, to keep their bodies themselves moving forward for future generations?
Yeah. So I think we'd all like to think there's some grand scheme, there's somebody out there figuring it out, and there are a lot of politicians, our own governor here in California is talking about he's going to do this and he's doing that, and legislatures are stepping up, our Planned Parenthoods are stepping up, doctors are stepping up. But at the end of the day, there is only one strategy in a democracy, and that is to vote. That's it. And anybody who tells you that there's some other grand cure here is just trying to let you off the hook. Hold yourself accountable. Ask yourself, what are you doing today to protect people? What are you doing today to protect yourselves? What are you doing today to build a future? And the answer is having conversations like this and then taking them down the street and having them in every neighborhood and every part and pocket of this country. And there is no grand strategy. There is nothing secret here. The hardest part about democracy is owning the responsibility it puts on us.
I wonder what it's like for you to walk the halls of Congress, to be milling when we see you guys on C-SPAN out front, and you're speaking to women who have been elected, who aren't protecting a woman's right to choose. What is that like when you're with these people who are so entrenched with dogma and tradition, or maybe they're just responding to what they think their voters want, but it's bad enough for the men, but when it's women who are holding back that right to choose, what is that like for you?
Well, I think this is an issue about politicians deciding that they know what's best. So I respect people who have other views about abortion. I believe abortion should be safe and legal so that those people can make up their own mind, so that everybody can make up their own mind. I think we need to have respect for people who have different views about abortion. So I try not to judge people's views, but I tell them it's because I respect your opinion that I am asking you to respect mine. As a politician, it's my job to know where my job ends and yours starts. And it's your decision whether to have a family. It's your decision whether to give birth. That's not my job. And so I think what it is really, from both men and women, a kind of hubris in the sense that they think they'll decide what is and is not, what is and is not right, what is or is not moral, what is or is not safe, what is or is not. It's up to people to make those decisions. And I think we ought to push back against any politician in any party who tries to take that decision and that power away from us.
And I want to point out that you're having a conversation. You're not yelling and screaming like a talking head on ESPN. You're actually having a conversation armed with information. And I think that's what's missing in modern politics right now, that nobody can hear.
Well, let's be clear. It is an intentional strategy from extremists to halt those conversations. Political violence, intimidation, it's not an accident. It's not just the zeitgeist of the day. It didn't come out of nowhere. It manifested itself because that polarization, that fear of, what if I bring up politics? What if I ask someone to vote? What if I knock on a door and it's a Republican? People, nothing is going to happen to you. I mean, you're going to have a conversation. We cannot be in the United States of America afraid of disagreement. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make you feel that if you bring up politics, if you ask someone if they voted, if you get out there and knock doors, that you're putting yourself at risk, that is an intentional strategy. And so I think we have to push back at it. So I always say, when I teach people how to knock doors, and I hope I can teach you all if you haven't done it before, I have a couple sayings I always tell people. And the first one is, knock loud, be proud. You are out there saving democracy. I don't want to hear this. If you were saving your neighbor from a fire or a flood, how would you knock? Well, guess what? Democracy's on fire. So knock loud. You are out there doing your civic part. I also talk about bring the cheer. No fear, bring the cheer. Mm-hmm. There is no question that makes me afraid. None. And part of that is having 3 children. So the most terrifying, questions are happening between like about 7 and 7:20 in the morning. When I'm like, are you really going to wear that? I don't see a problem, Mom. And so you have to have no fear. You can't give in to that. So if someone says to me, I had someone the other day, knocked a door in Costa Mesa right here in Orange County, and she said, I'm an evangelical Christian and I believe that abortion is wrong. And I said, I'm so glad that you're telling me that. Thank you for sharing your opinion. I really need to hear from people who think differently than me. Can I tell you how I think about it? And she said, okay. And I got that vote. I got that vote because I had that conversation. So we have to model that courage to have the conversations, and we have to model civility in how we have those conversations, because there's a very intentional strategy on the other side that is trying to silence us. And by the way, it's working. We have many fewer volunteers, many fewer phone bankers, many fewer door knockers than we saw in 2020 and 2018. And that is going to be to our peril going into November.
If any of you have not knocked and you have kids, it's the greatest thing ever. I drag my kids out there. I make them go up themselves because it's empowering, and our kids need to know early on that the future of democracy is in their hands. And if they feel educated and empowered, they care more about it.
Yep.
How does being a mom of 3 make you a better politician?
Well, it makes you tough. I mean, I have the worst constituents live in my own house, okay? I mean, there is nothing anyone is going to say to me at a town hall or if they call my office. I mean, these children have called me a neoliberal, they've called me a sellout, they've called me a fraud, they've told me that, you're not going to wear that, are you, Mom? I mean, I hear it all from them. And so, my one son had a sign on the door that said, 0 emissions, 2020, or do not enter. And then below it, he wrote, that means you, Mom. So I think having kids keeps you grounded, and I think one of the things is we need to elect more leaders who have young children, and who are really living it day to day. So, people are like, well, that guy wasn't very nice to you, and I'm thinking, have you met my 16-year-old? This is not the hardest part of my day. And so I think that is true for a lot of moms, and we need to take that energy out there. If you can stand down your kid, if you can teach a 14-year-old how to drive in Orange County, you can pretty much, there's no barriers.
If we get real, what is it like when you can say something so brilliant and you can stop a titan of industry in its tracks, and people want to talk about your lipstick or your hair or what you wore?
Yeah, I did not anticipate this. I think one thing about being a professor that I didn't fully appreciate is that the podium hides it all. And so now I'm like, oh no. Like even back here, I was like, oh no, not a step and repeat. These are the kinds of things that terrify me.
Sure.
But people want their leaders to look impressive. They're counting on us, right, to lead them in scary times. And they want us to look impressive, and they want us to sound calm, and they want us to put all that pressure on us to do that. At the same time, they want us to be an every woman, right? So, I think my power is I just go about my day. Like, if that's what I can find that's clean, that's what I'm wearing. So today, very helpfully, they suggested a jewel tone. And right now, yellow is a jewel tone, people. Because that's what I had. So you have to just kind of put it together, but you do have to get a thick skin. But I always try to tell myself, those people who are hurling insults, who are calling me, you just did a poll, and some of the things people said about me are hard to read. But you have to tell yourself, that is what we're fighting for. We're fighting for better conversations. We're fighting for civil discourse. And you can't run away from it. You have to lean into it. You have to lean into it, and you have to stand up for it.
And you have to push back against the bullies. You have to fight.
Yeah, you have to show people, and I think I have to show people, you're not in this fight alone. There are a lot of voices in this fight. Just make sure you're one of them. Make sure you're one of them. We have 2 weeks to the election. Your vote is your voice. Your voice is at stake in this election. So whatever your political views are, wherever you live in the country, there is a role for you in the next 2 weeks. Please do it.
So the future of women's rights is in the current
Okay, I'm going
government.
to stop, Suzy, because this is the thing. I'm such a rule follower. Watch this. Suzy, do you see that it says last question?
No, I ignore that. I have more questions. I'm sorry.
Don't make me
Is
get my
anybody
whiteboard
hungry?
out,
We
Suzy.
can Postmate Starbucks. Okay, last question. No, I have to. Okay, sorry, guys. I have 2 questions. I do like
Accountability comes in all forms.
There's going to be traffic. Where am I going? I have 2 more questions. Sorry, guys. You asked me to come. Sorry. Yahoo wanted to know, and I like Yahoo because I want them to spell my name right. So, what do you foresee for the election on November 8th? What do you foresee?
It is going to be very, very close. There are not very many safe seats. So the fact that you've seen somebody on MSNBC does not make them safe. People say, well, Lawrence O'Donnell loves you. People, Lawrence O'Donnell only gets 1 vote, and it's not in Orange County. That is not the path to winning. So I think people need to understand, we are seeing close elections. The electorate is unstable. The pandemic was unstable. That's why we're talking about making the future, about having to rebuild. And we are having to rebuild in our campaigns. So I think it's hard to know where it's going to go. But I can tell you, every single person across the country, in an even remotely Democratic-Republican even split, is seeing polls that are all over the place. People are still making up their minds. There is still time for you to be part of the conversation and to be part of delivering on your values by Tuesday.
He was getting his hair colored next to me last week, by the way. I can't look at him anymore because I know his color.
Yes.
I mean, come on. What's your message out there for the women in the room? This is about the future. This conference is all about making the future ourselves. What is your message?
Yeah, I would just say that there's no, do you want a future without you? Do you want a future where you can't be heard? Do you want a future where your choices are being made by someone else? If the answers are no, then you have to pair those wants and those desires with action. And that is really the only solution here. There is no magic wand. There is no Democrat. I say this jokingly, no amount of hair gel on Gavin Newsom is going to win my election, right? We have to do the work ourselves. And so I would just say to everybody, that is the only answer. If you want the future to look differently, then make it so. And that includes making it so in your personal life, in your professional life, in your self-care, and in democracy. That has to be on your to-do list. Democracy has to be on your to-do list, and for the next 2 weeks, it has to be the top item.
Congresswoman Katie Porter.
Hi, everyone. What an amazing day. Woo! How about it? So, we are going to have a very short break, but first you have a very important task. We need you to go get your group photo. So, as you walk out the doors right here, take a right in the rotunda.